"Will you dance with me?" Daniel asked. The blind woman turned toward his voice. The entire ballroom went silent. Daniel Owens stood in his janitor's uniform, hand extended. Evelyn Hart wore a silver gown that cost more than his yearly salary. She couldn't see him, but she could hear the whispers starting around them. "You're not a guest," she said quietly. "No, ma'am, I'm not." "Then why are you asking?" Daniel lowered his hand. "Because you've been standing alone for 20 minutes, and nobody else has." Evelyn's lips parted slightly. She tilted her head. "What's your name?" "Daniel Owens. I clean the executive floors." She smiled. It transformed her entire face. "Then yes, Daniel Owens, I'll dance with you." He took her hand. The crowd parted as he led her to the center of the floor. The orchestra had stopped playing. 300 people in tuxedos and designer dresses stared at them. Daniel placed one hand on her waist. She rested her hand on his shoulder. The conductor, confused, started the waltz again, and they danced. Daniel's alarm went off at 5 in the morning. He shut it off before it could wake Lily. His daughter slept in the twin bed across their studio apartment. She was 7 years old and looked exactly like her mother. Daniel pushed that thought away like he did every morning. He made coffee in the small pot by the sink. Toast, scrambled eggs. By the time breakfast was ready, Lily stumbled out of bed, rubbing her eyes. "Morning, sweetheart," Daniel said. "Is it Saturday?" Lily asked. "Friday," she groaned and sat at their tiny table. Daniel set down her plate. "Eat up. Mrs. Chen will be here in 30 minutes. "I like Mrs. Chen," Lily said through a mouthful of eggs. "Good, because I have to work late tonight." "How late?" "Really late. There's a big party at the office I have to clean before and after." Lily swung her feet under the chair. "Will there be fancy people?" "The fanciest." "Will you dance?" She grinned. Daniel laughed. "Janitors don't dance at these things, Lily. We clean up after the people who do." "Mama used to make you dance." The words hit him in the chest. Daniel took a breath. "Yeah, she did." "I miss her," Lily said, not sad, just stating a fact. "Me too, sweetheart." They finished breakfast. Daniel helped Lily pack her backpack for school. Mrs. Chen knocked at 6:30, same as always. She was 72 and lived 2 doors down. She charged almost nothing to watch Lily because Daniel had fixed her sink and her toilet and never asked for payment. "Have a good day at work," Mrs. Chen said. "Thank you. I'll pick her up tomorrow morning." Daniel kissed Lily's forehead. He grabbed his jacket and left. The bus to Meridian Tech took 40 minutes. Daniel knew every pothole on the route. The Meridian Tech building rose 30 stories above the city. Daniel had cleaned every floor at some point during his 3 years there. He swiped his employee badge at the service entrance. Jerry, the security guard, nodded at him. "Big night," Jerry said. "Annual gala, I know. CEO Hart spares no expense. They're bringing in real chandeliers, ice sculptures, the whole thing." Daniel headed to the basement locker room. He changed into his uniform and grabbed his cleaning cart. The ballroom took up the entire 20th floor. When Daniel arrived at 7, the decorators were still working. White flowers covered every surface. Tables had gold-rimmed plates and crystal glasses. A full orchestra was setting up on the stage. "Stay out of the way," the head decorator barked at him. Daniel stayed out of the way. He cleaned the bathrooms. He polished the brass railings. He made sure every trash can was empty and lined with fresh bags. By 4 in the afternoon, the ballroom looked like something from a movie. Daniel surveyed his work. Everything gleamed. "Owens," his supervisor called, "you're staying for the duration." "Yes, sir. Staff entrance only." "Keep your cart in the service hallway. If anyone needs something cleaned, you handle it immediately and invisibly. Understand?" "Understood." "The CEO will be here, board members, major investors. Do not speak to the guests unless spoken to." "Yes, sir." The supervisor left. Daniel wheeled his cart to the service hallway and waited. The guests started arriving at 6. Daniel watched through the narrow service window. Men in tuxedos, women in gowns, jewelry that could pay his rent for a decade. He recognized CEO Charles Hart immediately. The man was tall, silver-haired, and commanded attention just by entering a room. He shook hands with people who smiled too wide and laughed too loud. But Daniel noticed something else. Next to Charles Hart stood a young woman in a silver gown. She held his arm lightly. She wore dark glasses even though they were indoors. "That's his daughter," a catering worker whispered next to Daniel. "Evelyn Hart, she's blind." "How long?" Daniel asked. "Few years, I heard. Some kind of accident." Daniel watched Evelyn. Charles guided her to a table near the front. He said something to her. She nodded. Then he left to greet more guests, and Evelyn sat alone. An hour into the gala, Daniel was called to clean up a spilled drink. He grabbed a towel and cleaning solution. The woman who spilled it didn't apologize. She barely looked at him. Daniel cleaned it up in 30 seconds and disappeared back into the service hallway. He glanced toward the front table. Evelyn hadn't moved. People passed by her. Some nodded, some said hello, but nobody stopped. Nobody sat with her. Charles was across the room, talking to a group of men in expensive suits. He laughed at something someone said. He didn't look at his daughter once. Daniel told himself to mind his business. He was here to work, not to judge, not to interfere, but he kept watching. Evelyn turned her head slightly, tracking conversations she couldn't see. Her hands rested in her lap. She sat perfectly still, perfectly poised, perfectly alone. The dinner service began. Waiters brought out the first course. Evelyn's meal was placed in front of her. Someone whispered the position of her plate. She thanked them. She ate slowly, carefully. People at nearby tables talked and laughed. Nobody talked to her. Daniel felt something twist in his chest. He thought of Lily. He thought of what Sarah would have done. The orchestra began playing after dinner. Couples moved to the dance floor. Evelyn stayed seated. Daniel made a decision. He walked out of the service hallway. He crossed the ballroom. Several people glanced at him, confused by the janitor moving through their space. He stopped in front of Evelyn's table. "Excuse me," he said. She turned her head toward him. "Yes. My name is Daniel. I work here. I was wondering." He paused. His heart hammered. "Would you like to dance?" Evelyn's expression shifted. Surprise, confusion. "You work here?" "I'm a janitor, but I know how to dance. My wife taught me." "Your wife?" "She passed away 2 years ago." The noise around them seemed to dim. Evelyn stood slowly. "I'd like that very much, Daniel." He took her hand. It was small and warm in his. He led her carefully to the dance floor. The other dancers stopped. The music continued, but people began to notice. The janitor, the CEO daughter. Daniel didn't care. He placed his hand on Evelyn's waist. She found his shoulder. They began to move. "I haven't danced in 3 years," Evelyn said quietly. "Neither have I," Daniel replied. "Why not? Nobody to dance with." She smiled. "People avoid me. They don't know what to say to a blind person. That's their problem, not yours. You're very direct." "I don't have time to be anything else. I have a 7-year-old daughter and 2 jobs." "2 jobs?" "This one, and weekends I fix things for people in my building." They turned slowly. Daniel guided her with gentle pressure. She followed perfectly. "You're a good dancer," she said. "You are too. My father used to dance with me before the accident." Daniel didn't ask about the accident. "Does he dance with you now?" "No, he barely looks at me now." The words were quiet but heavy. Daniel saw Charles across the room. The CEO had finally noticed his daughter on the dance floor. His face had gone pale. "He's watching us," Daniel said. "Is he angry?" "I can't tell. He'll probably fire you. Probably." "Does that scare you?" Daniel thought of Lily, of their apartment, of the bills stacked on the counter. "Yes, but some things are worth it." Evelyn's grip on his shoulder tightened. "Thank you, Daniel." "For what?" "For seeing me." The song ended. The ballroom erupted in applause. Daniel hadn't expected that. People were clapping for them. Evelyn's face flushed. "They're clapping?" "Standing ovation," Daniel said. She laughed. It was a real laugh, surprised and delighted. Daniel led her back to her table. "Thank you again," she said. "Anytime, Miss Hart." He turned to leave. A hand caught his arm. Charles Hart stood behind him. His face was unreadable. "Mr. Owens," the CEO said, "come with me." Daniel followed Charles out of the ballroom. They walked down a quiet hallway. Charles stopped at a large window overlooking the city. "How long have you worked here?" Charles asked. 3 years, sir. "And before that?" "I was studying engineering, but my wife got sick. I dropped out to take care of her." Charles turned to face him. "You have a daughter?" Yes, sir, Lily, she's 7, and you work as a janitor to support her. Yes, sir. Charles studied him. Daniel couldn't read the expression on his face. Anger, sadness, something else. Why did you dance with my daughter? Charles asked. Daniel met his eyes. Because she was alone, and nobody deserves that. You could lose your job. I know. You have a daughter depending on you. Bills to pay, and you risked all of that for one dance. Yes, sir. Charles looked back out the window. Do you know how Evelyn lost her sight? Daniel said nothing. It was my fault, Charles continued, his voice cracked. A car accident 5 years ago. I was driving. I was on my phone, a work call, always a work call. He stopped, took a breath. We hit a barrier. She was in the passenger seat. The impact caused severe trauma to her optic nerves. I'm sorry, Daniel said. She told me it wasn't my fault. The doctors said it wasn't my fault, but I know the truth. Charles's hands shook. I did that to her, my own daughter. And ever since, I can't even look at her without seeing what I took away. So you don't look at her at all, Daniel said quietly. Charles flinched. I provide everything she needs, the best doctors, the best care, except yourself. Excuse me, Daniel knew he should stop. He knew he was talking himself out of a job. But he thought of Lily, of how she'd feel if he started avoiding her out of guilt. She doesn't need expensive doctors, sir. She needs her father. Charles's jaw tightened. You have no idea what you're talking about. I watched her sit alone for an hour while you worked the room, while you laughed with investors. She's not invisible. You're just not looking. How dare you? I lost my wife, the love of my life. Cancer took her piece by piece, and the worst part wasn't watching her die. It was the time I wasted, the moments I didn't appreciate, the times I was too tired or too stressed to sit with her. Daniel's voice shook. You still have your daughter, Mr. Hart. She's right there, and you're throwing away every moment because you're too afraid to forgive yourself. Silence filled the hallway. Charles turned back to the window. His reflection showed tears on his face. I don't know how, he whispered. Start by dancing with her, Daniel said. Charles wiped his eyes. He straightened his jacket. When he turned back to Daniel, something had changed in his expression. What's your full name? Charles asked. Daniel Owens. And you studied engineering? Yes, sir, 3 years at State before I dropped out. Why engineering? I wanted to build things, solve problems, make things better. Charles nodded slowly. I started this company 30 years ago with that same goal, make things better, but somewhere along the way I forgot what that meant. Sir, come back to the ballroom, I want to show you something. They walked back together. The gala was still in full swing. Charles led Daniel to the stage. He picked up a microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, Charles said, may I have your attention? The room quieted. 300 faces turned toward the stage. Thank you all for coming tonight. As you know, Meridian Tech has had another record year, but success means nothing without purpose. Charles paused. Tonight, I watched a janitor show more courage and compassion than anyone in this room, including myself. Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. My daughter Evelyn has been sitting alone all evening. Not one person asked her to dance, not one board member, not one investor, not one colleague I call a friend. Charles's voice grew stronger. But Daniel Owens did, a man who risks his job to show basic human kindness, a widowed father working 2 jobs to support his daughter. He saw my daughter when I couldn't. Evelyn stood at her table, her hand covered her mouth. 5 years ago, I caused the accident that took Evelyn's sight. I've spent every day since drowning in guilt. Providing money, providing care, providing everything except what she actually needed. My presence, my attention, my love. Charles looked directly at his daughter. I'm sorry, Evelyn, I'm so sorry. The ballroom was completely silent. Tonight, Meridian Tech is launching a new initiative, the Evelyn Hart Foundation. Dedicated to supporting people with disabilities, not just with money, but with dignity, with opportunity. With the same humanity Daniel showed tonight, Charles turned to Daniel, and Daniel Owens will lead it. Daniel's mind went blank. What? You heard me. You have the education, the compassion, the integrity. I'm offering you a position as director of the Evelyn Hart Foundation. Full salary, full benefits, starting Monday. Sir, I clean floors. Not anymore, if you'll accept. Daniel looked at Evelyn. She was crying, smiling, both at once. He thought of Lily, of their studio apartment, of the bills and the second job and the constant weight of barely getting by. He thought of Sarah, of what she'd say if she were here. "Yes," Daniel said, "I accept." Daniel walked into the Meridian Tech building through the main entrance, not the service entrance, the main entrance. He wore a suit now. It still felt strange. Jerry waved from the security desk. "Morning, Mr. Owens." "Morning, Jerry." Still just Daniel. "Not according to your new business cards." Daniel took the elevator to the 15th floor. The Evelyn Hart Foundation had the entire floor now. 20 employees, growing every week. His office had a window. He still wasn't used to that either. "Dad," Lily's voice called from the reception area. Daniel stepped out of his office. Lily ran down the hall toward him. Mrs. Chen followed at a more reasonable pace. "Sweetheart, what are you doing here?" Daniel asked. "Half day at school. Mrs. Chen said we could visit." "I called first," Mrs. Chen said, slightly out of breath. "Your secretary said it was fine." "It's always fine." Daniel hugged his daughter. "Want to see what I'm working on?" "Yes." He led her into his office. On his desk were plans for the Foundation's first major project, a technology program for visually impaired students. "Is that Braille?" Lily asked, pointing at some of the materials. "It is. We're creating tablets that work entirely through audio and touch." "Cool." A knock sounded at the door. Evelyn stood in the doorway with her guide dog, a golden retriever named Compass. "Am I interrupting?" Evelyn asked. "Never," Daniel said. "Lily, you remember Miss Hart?" "Hi." Lily rushed over to pet Compass. "Can I pet your dog?" "Of course. Compass loves kids." Lily buried her face in the dog's fur. Mrs. Chen watched with a smile. "I have the final approval from the board," Evelyn said to Daniel. "The scholarship program is funded. All 50 positions. All 50, and my father added his personal funding for 10 more. How is he?" Evelyn's smile softened. "Better. We had dinner last night, just the two of us. He asked about my music lessons, my advocacy work. He actually listened." "That's good." "He asked about you too, wanted to make sure you weren't working too hard." Daniel laughed. "This doesn't feel like work." "Good, because we have a lot to do." They spent the next hour reviewing programs. Lily played with Compass. Mrs. Chen dozed in a chair by the window. At noon, Charles stopped by. He did that sometimes now, just checking in. "How's my favorite foundation?" he asked. "Thriving," Evelyn said. Charles crossed to his daughter. He kissed the top of her head. She leaned into him. Daniel watched them. 3 months ago they barely spoke. Now they had dinner twice a week. Charles had even started learning Braille. "Lily," Charles said, "your father tells me you like science." "I love science," Lily said. "Then you should come to our lab sometime. We're working on some exciting robotics projects." Lily's eyes went wide. "Really? Really, Daniel, bring her by next week." "Will do, sir." "Charles," the CEO corrected. "We're past sir now." After Charles and Evelyn left, Daniel took Lily and Mrs. Chen to lunch in the executive cafeteria, another thing that still felt surreal. They sat by the window, the city stretched out below them. "Dad," Lily said through a mouthful of mac and cheese. "Are we rich now?" Mrs. Chen chuckled. Daniel smiled. "We're comfortable, sweetheart. That's better than rich." "What's the difference?" "Rich is having money. Comfortable is not worrying about it." "Oh," Lily thought about this. "I like comfortable." "Me too." "Do you still miss Mama?" The question caught him off guard, but it didn't hurt like it used to. "Every day, but I think she'd be proud of us." "Because you help people now." "Because we both do. You're kind to everyone, Lily, just like she was." Lily beamed. She returned to her mac and cheese. Daniel looked out at the city. 6 months ago, he was cleaning these floors, barely scraping by, drowning in grief and bills. One dance had changed everything. Not because it was magical, not because it solved all his problems, but because it reminded him of what mattered. Connection, courage, seeing people who were invisible to everyone else. He thought of Sarah. Of their last dance in the hospital room, her Roman 4 pole between them. She'd been so weak, but she'd smiled and put her head on his shoulder. "Promise me something," she'd whispered. "Anything. Don't stop dancing, even after I'm gone." He'd kept that promise, at a gala where he didn't belong, with a woman who needed to be seen. And somehow, impossibly, it had led here. Daniel finished his lunch. He had a meeting at 2, a grant proposal to review at 3, dinner with Lily at 6, a simple evening at home after that. His life wasn't perfect, but it was his, and it was good. Dad, Lily tugged his sleeve. Can you teach me to dance? Like you danced with Miss Hart, Daniel smiled. Sure, sweetheart, I'd love to. Will you dance at the foundation gala next month? Mrs. Chen asked. Daniel had forgotten about that. The foundation's first fundraiser, he was expected to give a speech. I don't know, he said. You should, Mrs. Chen said. You're good at it. At dancing. At bringing people together. Daniel thought about it, about standing in front of a crowd, about being visible instead of invisible. It still scared him, but some things were worth it. Yeah, he said. I'll dance. Lily clapped. Mrs. Chen smiled, and somewhere Daniel felt certain Sarah smiled too. One dance, that's all it took. Not a grand gesture, not a corporate ladder climbed, just one janitor, one lonely woman, and the courage to see what everyone else ignored. Daniel Owens went from cleaning floors to changing lives. Charles Hart learned to forgive himself and see his daughter again. And Evelyn? She finally got what she'd needed all along. Not pity. Not accommodation, just someone willing to treat her like a person. The Evelyn Hart Foundation now serves thousands. It started with 50 scholarships. It's grown to programs across 12 states, all because a widowed father decided that kindness mattered more than keeping his head down. Sometimes the smallest acts create the biggest changes. Sometimes the invisible people are the ones who see most clearly, and sometimes all it takes is asking someone to dance. This is the story of Daniel Owens, a janitor who became a director, a widower who kept his promise, a father who taught his daughter that courage means seeing people others don't, all because he danced.